The Sunday Paper Review
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care, proud sponsors of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care, because care changes everything.
And you're welcome to the Sunday Paper Review on Off the Ball. John Duggan sitting in for Adrian Barry on the papers today. The Sunday Paper Review on Off the Ball brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care, proud sponsors of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care, because care changes everything. Delighted to be joined in studio by the GA correspondent of the Irish Independent, Colm Keys, and the columnist with the Star, Roy Curtis. Roy and Colm, happy All-Ireland hurling final day.
Yeah, day of national celebration. I always get particularly excited on these mornings. I think it's sort of something very distinctive. I wrote about it yesterday, and it's a distinctive Celtic tattoo, I think, on the arm of summer. And in a world that's ever more homogenised, I find it, you know, it's a world of Amazon, and it's a world of Netflix, and it's a world of Nike, that this little slab of rock has something that it can celebrate, this means of lyrical expression that I feel touches people in a certain way. And I know when we stray into the territory of myth, it might irritate some people. And yes, Gaelic football and association football, if you want to call it soccer, are played far more wildly across the country. But there's something ancient and ours about hurling. I have to say, when that parade starts today, sitting up in the stand, I get a bit emotional. I feel it encapsulates the very, very best of Ireland.
And a first Cork-Tipperary final as well, Colm.
It is, John, it's amazing that it is. Obviously, they can only have ever met in an All-Ireland final in the last 29 years since the first of the backdoor iterations came in. But it's strange to think that it has taken this long, even, because you've had two Cork-Clare finals. You have had, you know, other different finals that have come together, but not this particular. And this is the most storied rivalry of all through Munster. And there's a lot of big rivalries that have developed over the years, but none within a province is bigger than this. And they've played in so many Munster finals, and you can go back through the years, and you know, our memory would be of 1990, 1991, 1992, the end of the famine in 1987 as well, and just some of the great games that they have played. More further back now than perhaps in recent times, the rivalry has become a little bit skewed in recent years, and Cork have had, by and large, the upper hand, and indeed this year. But the All-Ireland final, it's a culmination day. It's the culmination of everything you've got here. And it's such a celebration, as Roy says. I was coming across the city here to get here this morning, and you're looking at people on the move at 10 o'clock in the morning with their Tipperary jerseys and their Cork jerseys. And, you know, you stop at the traffic lights and you see them coming across, and you're wondering, well, were they up last night, or when did they come up, or where have they come from? And
what's their story?
Who are they? Yeah. What's their story, and who are they? And what part of Cork or Tipperary have they come from? You know, have they been in the traffic this morning by train? And, you know, everybody just moving towards Jones's Road or Clondiff Road or whatever entrance. Everybody, you know, making their way over there, whatever arteries or veins. And the All-Ireland final rituals this morning on Talbot Street now, the commemoration of Sean Tracy, who was killed there in 1922. Big Tipp tradition that on the days that they're in the All-Ireland final, they will gather at the place where he was killed. And that's just a Tipperary thing that they do on All-Ireland final day. And Cork will have their traditions and all of that. So it is a tremendous day. And as Roy said, you know, behind the band, that's a celebration too for everybody. And the national anthem is played with the band only, and the crowd sing along and contribute in whatever way. So even though hurling is played by less counties, the rivalries are probably greater. And in the GA, Cork and Tipperary, it's probably up there with them all.
I think the point Colm makes about rituals and things people do on All-Ireland final weekends. I was out and about town last evening, and there were families adults now bringing their children who would have went to the Palace Bar and Mulligan's the night before the match, and they're there with the next generation, people in the colours, people who meet up, maybe a lot of former players who meet up once a year. Michael Foley writes very powerfully today about his own relationship with his late father and how hurling was so central to that, and how much he'll miss the phone call from his father today. He's talking about, so imagine then what Sunday means. No game, no sporting event will ever feel bigger. The thing I'll miss from today is the phone call, the one that came after every match from wherever my father was, at home or in hospital, when his health began ebbing away, his portal to a world he couldn't reach anymore. And if Tipperary had just been in combat with Cork, that chat would eat up most of the road. I think anybody listening will have their own story. Anybody going to the match will have their own family connection that makes it bigger than sport. The sport is at the centre of the day, but it facilitates a lot of other things that are equally as important. People coming together, a celebration of friendship, old stories told. Those things really, really matter on a day like today.
My first hurling final was 1991, and I started secondary school the following day. It was Cork-Tipperary, and I have the ticket stub at home, and Jerry McInerney with the white boots is on the ticket stub, and it was 19 punts. My dad brought me, and he was from Clare, and he was born in 1933. He died in 2002, but he'd never even seen Clare win a Munster till 95 in his life. And then they reached the final 4 years later in 95. And when Eamon Taft's goal went in, and when Anthony Daly scored the long range effort, we just looked at each other, and everything is unsaid. And it's 81 years of a wait for Clare to win the All-Ireland. And in 1914, the Easter Rising hadn't happened yet. We were under British rule. And then Clare in 1995 win the All-Ireland. And it's just the most unbelievable day to have that memory with a parent or with anybody that you're close to and you love. And in 2014, Clare were reigning All-Ireland champions. I was lucky enough to get the Lee McCarthy Cup for a few hours in Quinn, where my dad's village was, in Clare. And I was told you got it for a few hours from 5 to 8 o'clock. There was a massive storm in Ireland. The train stopped in Thurles and I wasn't going anywhere, and I was starting to panic. So I got a taxi to Quinn, 150 quid. Got into Quinn, there was a power cut, and took the bag out of a hold-all bag, and I took the cup out of it, the Lee McCarthy Cup out of a hold-all, and brought it around the pubs in Quinn in candlelight. 100 years on from when the captain of the 1914 team, Amby Power, was from that village. So that's what it means to me. I've been to 29 finals. You guys have been to a lot more. Remember Galway winning in 2017 after 29 years. Remember Offaly winning in 98. Remember Kilkenny's 4 in a row. Remember Limerick winning after 45 years and then winning 4 in a row themselves. Like, for Cork and Tipperary people today, whoever wins, and obviously you'll commiserate the losers, but whoever wins, they'll carry these memories for the rest of their lives.
It's a picture album that lives inside your head forever. I have spoken before. It's Gaelic football, but it's the same sort of story where my dad was of a generation of people who never spoke about their feelings, things were left unsaid, sort of the strong, silent hero. And in 1976, he brought me to the All-Ireland semi-final. And he bought me a Mars bar and one of those old crepe hats that you wore. And we walked up among the red bricks at Drumcondra. I was 7.5, and he was holding my hand. And that was his way of telling me he loved me. And when my dad died, his funeral was the day after the Startled Earwigs game in 2009. And when Dublin got to the final in 2011, I was asked to write a piece for the programme, and I wrote about my relationship with my father and that I had never told him I loved him. But those days walking up together, it was unspoken but said. And when Dublin won that day, I vaulted out of the press box and found my mother, and we hugged, and there were tears, and she could feel his presence that day. And that's the power these games have. That's what they do to people.
My father was from Cavan and I grew up in Meath, and neither were mapped in the 70s or 80s, so we had no track record of going to games. We, from a distance, it was Kerry and Dublin. That's what we grew up on, obviously, as the country did. And when you think back of that era, what that rivalry, Kerry and Dublin, did for Gaelic football. I've often heard Pat Spillane say it saved Gaelic football. And I tend to agree with him. I mightn't have. I says, no, that's a bit of a stretch. But it very, very much did. And they were my memories of sitting at home watching those particular games. More so obviously than Cork and Tipperary. That rivalry was Tipperary were down for so long in that period as well. But Kerry and Dublin certainly would be my earliest memories. In terms of hurling, like, we have just come off last year one of the greatest All-Ireland hurling finals between Cork and Clare. There is absolutely no doubt about that, the way that went, marked by 2 of the great goals. I didn't think I would see a better goal than Rob Downey's, the run he made.
It lasted all of 15 minutes.
And I says, you won't see a better goal than that in a long time for an All-Ireland final. And then Tony Kelly did what he did. Just a magnificent game throughout. I go back to the 2009 and 2010 All-Ireland finals between Kilkenny and Tipperary. in the middle of that great rivalry between those counties. And I always remember the start of both games. It was frantic. It was just almost lawless. I remember Pádraig Maher, he was only in on the team as a young man, a young defender, big shoulders on him. And he was hitting everything and he was absorbing knocks, and he was in the middle of it. And this guy's at 20, 21, whatever he is in 2009. And he just absorbs everything. And what a player he became. Obviously, they won the year after. But those two games, I think 2013, the replay between
Under lights,
Cork and Clare under the lights, Shane O'Donnell gets that hat-trick. In 2014 as well, the drama of the late free. And even the 2014 replay in its own way was a terrific game just as a contest. It's just such a battle. So they're the hurling finals that really jump out at me. Obviously, Limerick winning in 2018 and the way they did. The 2022 game was a magnificent game too, even though Limerick were probably always going to win it. But it was a really, really, on a really warm day. But I think last year stands up there with any of them.
I think there's two elements. The game has a visceral, feral nature, almost lawless, as you say, which I think appeals to the Irish psyche. But coexisting with that, there's this extraordinary level of skill. And to see that combination of speed and skill, and then you have individuals, and I think when we talk about the great finals, I'll recall 2017 because Joe Canning. We tend to marry these things to individuals, and you wanted to see a truly immense figure have his career crowned with All-Ireland glory. And I think a lot of people will feel the same about Patrick Horgan today. The all-time leading scorer in both championship and league. 18 seasons there. A guy who was talked about his obsession with the game. I was writing a piece about him yesterday, and I looked back on an interview he actually did with Donal O'Cusack last year. And he's a very softly spoken guy, but really intense. And he was talking about how he would spend days, weeks trying to get a hurl right. He was talking about how on days off from training, he would spend 3 hours down at the alley, not seeing it as additional training, just because the hurl was an extension of him and it was his great means of self-expression. And I think now he's playing at an age where Simon Harris became Taoiseach at 37 years of age. And I think the crowning glory, the emotion of the occasion, if Patrick Horgan won today, obviously Tipp people might not share that feeling, but I think for a lot of counties, and people don't naturally gravitate to big counties like Dublin or Cork as neutrals, but I think a lot of people would love Patrick Horgan to get a reward for an immense career today.
There's a lot of good writing, as you mentioned there. Michael Foley's beautiful piece in the Sunday Times. There's a Pat Ryan profile as well in the Irish Daily Mail. Philip Lanigan has done that. There's a piece on Brian O'Mara from Dermot Crowe in the Sunday Independent. There's other pieces in the Sunday Times about the Cork midfield column.
Yeah, there's a piece in the Sunday Times about the Cork midfield, about Dara Fitzgibbon and Tim O'Mahony. One from Charleville, the other from Newton Chandram, and they grew up and developed on Cork underage teams. They went to school together, then they went their separate ways, but were great friends, and now they are together in the engine room for Cork and really are, while that full forward line of Patrick Horgan, Alan Conley and Brian Hayes have been involved in so much, and their goal strike and the creation of goals. Tim O'Mahony and Dara Fitzgibbon continue to drive. They are the perfect midfield partnership. Fitzgibbon earlier in the year was centre forward, but they've since brought him back where he can use his pace from deeper positions. And O'Mahony scored the 2 goals against Dublin, set up another one, has a goal from earlier in the year against Tipperary as well. I mean, he is such a physical presence, and together their careers have been intertwined. So that's mapped in the Sunday Times. And then there's interviews with Brian O'Mara, and in one of the interviews, I think it's in the Sunday Times or maybe it's in the Sunday Independent, but he references meeting Pat Ryan in Pfizer in their place of work after in Cork after the defeat last year. Very, very heavy defeat for Tipperary, and having Pat Ryan delivering consoling words to a Tipperary player afterwards that your time will come, and their time has come quite quickly. And really one of the underpinning stories of this All-Ireland final is how Tipperary have turned everything around, not their season around, but turned everything to do with the team from where they were last year, because coming out of Semple Stadium where they were outnumbered, if you remember that game in the Munster Championship, they still had a game to go against Clare, but that's the game that put them out. Cork, coming off the back of that win, that landmark win really as it was for this team over Limerick in Páirc Uí Chaoimh on that Saturday evening, and they go up and they outnumber supporters wise. It was 8-1. Who can qualify anyway? It was 8 or 9 or 10-1. Tipp support had just ebbed away and has been ebbing away for a long time. I remember Liam Cahill has referenced it a few times. He said coming out of the All-Ireland minor final in Nolan Park last year when 13-man Tipp beat Kilkenny, he said, we were all so happy for the team that they showed a certain side of Tipperary there to win. But he said, we're also embarrassed that what we had done ourselves and that had taken young 16 and 17-year-olds to show the way. And it has become a real reference point for this Tipperary team now. Jake Morris, Brian O'Mara, they're all mentioning it, the embarrassment of what happened last year and how they've turned it around and faced that. So for them to be back in an All-Ireland final so quickly after those lows, the lows of last year's championship, and Tipp haven't been performing well in recent years. Since 2019, they've really, really struggled. Their last game was their first time back in Croke Park. 2022 was the year Colin Bonner came in. That was a washout. Even the way they lost to Galway in the 2023 All-Ireland quarterfinal. So they haven't been at it, but their attitude has completely flipped around, and Liam Cahill deserves great credit for that, because I find him very honest and straight and blunt in all his deliveries. He doesn't sugarcoat it in any way. And they've brought resolve to Tipperary. Whatever happens today, and they have players coming. They have, obviously, Darragh McCarthy, who's had his red card troubles. I'm sure he'll get beyond that. Oisin O'Donoghue, who has scored the 3 goals, the last goal. We talk about Rob Downey and Tony Kelly. Well, where does that goal fit into that? Of course it does. It's right up there. And Paddy McCormick, who's in on the bench. I think that's a very interesting inclusion for Tipperary today. That young man is in on the bench given his form for the under-20s. So a complete reversal and a flip around for that. But from a Cork point of view, Philip Lanigan calls that the headline is the Great Redeemer. And for Pat Ryan on the profile and the interview with Pat Ryan, and he very, very much is that. He's a guy that you can see why Cork players would want to play for him. He has that bit of charisma, that he's relaxed and just an all-round nice guy that he comes across as. And you can see why Cork players would want to play for him.
I think even reading the Pat Ryan piece with Philip Lanigan today, I think his personality shines through. He talks about everything from Roy Keane to James McCarthy, and he talks about what Cork means to him. Philip says he doesn't shy away from Cork's history and that tradition of winning on All-Irelands. He said, I think that's the standard. What we have to live to is what the Cork jersey represents to the people of Cork. Look, fellas might say it's cocky or arrogant. We haven't won an All-Ireland in 20 years, but I'm talking about my generation. I can only talk about my generation. I grew up in that situation, and the Cork jersey has to mean something to everyone, every time you put it on. And that goes back to the public following us. And he references the players I grew up idolising in the 80s. There was no soccer, there was no rugby. The Teddy McCartys, the Tomas Mulls, the Jim Cashmans, the Jimmy Barry Murphys, the Sean O'Learys, the Shani O'Learys, they were gods. It was like the Kerry team and the Dublin team of the 70s. That's who the people were. That's who the heroes were around the place. I think that's why today is so, so important to Cork. There certainly isn't anything like a free shot in an All-Ireland. But if Tipp perform credibly today, as Colm said, they've restored the relationship with the people and there's a sense that they're coming. If Cork lose today, it is Armageddon. It's catastrophe. They cannot lose that game, given where they've come from, given the momentum and the hype that's built up. Colm again referenced the crowd that followed him up for the Dublin game. I have had more calls and emails for this final than I ever remember. I thought there was a very peculiar take in Eamon Sweeney's piece in the Sunday Indo today, where he called it the sideshow final, a game that has a regional feel to it. I could not be more at odds or disagree more with that. Michael Foley's line about it being as big as it gets, I think this is a huge occasion. I think there's great colour to it, but I think it's a real moment in time for Cork. And Pat Ryan references a podcast that struck him recently one with Bernard Dunn and Gary Keegan, and Dublin's James McCarthy was on, and he said, I only listened to it about 2 weeks ago, and he just said when he was with Dublin, there's a way that Dublin should play and there's a way that Dublin should carry themselves. And I just said, Jesus, that makes total sense. When you watch James McCarthy play, that's the way he lived as a footballer. And I think that's what Pat Ryan is trying to restore to Cork, that sense of something essential that they find with the hurling team. And the people have rallied round it. It's a movement now. I was talking to someone in Cork during the week who said people who'd sort of latched on to Munster rugby in its successful period, who wouldn't necessarily have a rugby heritage, are right back in the hurling camp and right back behind this team.
I think I think this is maybe the biggest movement of people in terms of following that the GAA has seen, even up there with Dublin in the 70s and Dublin again in the early 2000s and Dublin in the earlier part of the last decade. To see 60,000 people transport from one city 2.5 hours up the road to another for an All-Ireland semi-final is just phenomenal. And obviously it's the biggest county and one of the biggest populations, so all of that. And you saw Donegal and Meath on their own putting 80 full house last weekend. Armagh in the last few years, the mobilisation of people there. But this is the biggest by dint of obviously size and population. But there's a whole new young generation of people out following teams now.
Following.
It is.
And that's reflective. Of course you won't see them in their clubs and you won't see them when... So what? They're getting behind an entity. And just young people on the terrace, the Blackrock end in Cork. It's just a new movement of people. And I've seen that in football as well this year as well. Obviously the football is better, but that Croke Park experience for younger people to get on buses and come into the towns, it's just such an occasion, an event. It has become really, really event driven. And obviously it helps that the product is better. It's certainly better in football, and it's always there in hurling too. So it's just such a movement, this Cork movement of people, and it really would be so anticlimactic now.
It would be Mayo
if they don't deliver. Well, to be honest, I think Cork will continue to come. I think they still have more players to integrate into their team. Obviously, for Patrick Horgan, it might be a year too far.
Seamus
Who knows?
Harnedy, yeah.
Seamus Harnedy was there in 2013 as well. They've lost 4 finals and obviously drawn one since they last.
Leinster's weak.
It would be coming into Mayo territory, yes. But I do think Cork will get a fix on this. If not today, I think it will be today. But if it's not today, it will be soon enough. Have to say, but if they didn't beat Tipperary today, having beaten them by 15 in the championship, 10 in the league, and hammering them last year, it'd be a real setback.
I think the stakes are really, really high for them in both ways. Potentially they win today. There's a Limerick-Kilkenny type dynasty that we could be seeing the first steps of. Lose today, do Limerick come back next year? Tipp have potential to go further, I think, in the coming years. It is one of those sliding doors moments for Cork, even if, as Colm says, they have more to integrate. When that psychic blow of losing a couple of finals gets embedded in a team, as you say with Mayo, you can see it can have serious long-term implications.
I love the kind of sidebar stories as well in the Irish Daily Mail. The outrage and absurdity add to the special day. Mark Gallagher on the tickets.
I love a good ticket scramble, I must say. Obviously, I'm from Dublin, and when Dublin are involved, people assume that you have this suitcase of tickets at home, and I sort of enjoy trying to get tickets for people, and there's a certain art to it. It's sort of like golf handicaps. There are some people are ticket accumulators off scratch. They just have a way, and they will produce. You go into, say, the Palace Bar now in an hour, and I know one guy, and he will have 2 spare tickets that he's been holding all week just so he can present them at this moment. And the stories become legend, and obviously you hear things about draws and how people get to tickets. But the morning of a match, tickets miraculously appear. And
even today?
Yeah, tickets will appear.
People are holding tickets so that they can produce to the right person at the right moment and extract the currency from that. There's no doubt that tickets are being held. It might be in the hundreds, but there are 100 or 200 tickets out there that are ready to be, as like the man in the palace. There you go.
Yeah.
I've made your day. But at least, Roy, the tickets are transferable digitally now. You don't have to hop into a car and drive to Fermanagh, as was the case. People crisscross the country.
Yeah.
I mean, the carbon footprint has been reduced by digitisation of tickets because people literally would drive to gather tickets and bring them back as a favour to someone. There you go, I got you them.
My nephew was promised a ticket for the Champions League final in 2019 as a Spurs fan. The only problem was the ticket was in Australia.
Well, Fermanagh is one thing.
Who's going to win it?
If both teams play at the peak of their powers, Cork win. I think if Cork are anything from 85% of their best, they win. I think if Tipperary stay close for long enough, you just wonder about a bit of a groan around the crowd, the weight of expectation, and could that potentially be a problem for Cork? But I think what we've seen from Cork, I think they're ready. I think winning the league, winning the first Munster in 7 or 8 years, I think those are important moments, and I think they're ready.
I think they're ready too. I haven't been overly impressed with them in the Munster Championship. Obviously, they got the job done against Limerick that night in the Gaelic grounds. They had the advantage of numerical advantage once McCarthy went off. I don't think it had a huge impact, but I thought the performance against Dublin was sensational. People say, well, it was Dublin first time there in 12 years and whatever else, but it was still ruthless, and I think they're ready to take that ruthlessness now to Tipperary. I think they'll win nowhere near as convincingly as the Championship or the League or last year or anything like that. I think a 4 or 5 point win is where it sits at for Cork.
This is the Sunday paper review on Off the Ball with the GA correspondent of the Irish Independent, Colm Keys, and the columnist with the Star, Roy Curtis. And the Sunday paper review on Off the Ball brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care, proud sponsors of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care because care changes everything. Let's get on to the Open Championship because it's on the island of Ireland, which I think can never be underplayed. I think it's just a magnificent thing that we got this international sporting event on this island up in Antrim, in the coast of Antrim, and Scotty Scheffler tees off at 2:30 with a 4-shot lead and likely to win. Rory McIlroy's been a big story obviously this week, and he's done himself justice. I would say he's going into the final round in a tie for fourth, but he's 6 shots behind Scheffler. I suppose one of the interesting things this week, Roy, was Scheffler's press conference, because he out of nowhere came out with this existential quote about fulfillment, and it's very interesting for somebody at the peak of their powers and playing probably as well as Woods did in his prime to be coming out with this stuff. Yeah,
it reminded me of Stephen Roach when he won the Triple Crown of cycling in 87. And he talked about the buzz just lasting a minute or two and then it was gone. And he'd spent all this time trying to climb up the mountaintop, literally and metaphorically. And once he reached it, it was as if the challenge had been everything, but he didn't derive the fulfillment he thought he would from it. And I was doing a piece on it during the week, and I was looking at various sportsmen to see how they think and to see how they react to victory. And there's a great quote from LeBron James, which sort of reminded me a little bit of the Scheffler stuff, where he said, being a winner is a curse. It doesn't matter how much you've won before. You are not a winner until you win again and again and again. Nothing is enough. No one understands, and you never wanted to stop. That to me shone a light sort of on the competitive compulsion, the single-minded, near sociopathic mania that drives the arena's giants. And Scheffler has conquered Everest now. He's planted the flag up there. He is clearly the best all-round golfer since Tiger Woods. And yet he finds that it's not ticking all the boxes for him, that there's a world beyond it. He's a man of faith. He's a family man. He wouldn't be a wild carouser in any way.
He's not a barroom brawler.
No, he's certainly not a barroom brawler. And I think Conor McKeown in the Sunday Independent today, Conor's a very humorous guy and writes with a caustic eye, and he has a magnificent comparison, one I never thought I'd see in my life. Scotty Scheffler and Johnny Pilkington in the same sentence. Johnny Pilkington, of course, the maverick Offaly hurler of the 90s. And Conor's piece, which I think it's worth quoting the first couple of paragraphs. There we were, trying to figure out which former global superstar athlete Scotty Scheffler reminded us of with his bout of unprompted existential nihilism on Tuesday, when it struck us like a mallet on the top of the head. Johnny Pilkington. An old quote from Offaly and Burr's Great Maverick. The whole idea of it is actually ridiculous, he once observed, while still in the part of his hurling career that might be described as his pomp. Training in muck and dirt, a big chunk of life gone for a little chunk of metal. Why bother, I think to myself sometimes. Every game is the important game. The All-Ireland, it's the biggest thing ever. 2 weeks later, it's the club championship. We have to win that to get into the county final. We'd never put one back-to-back or something, so that's the most important thing. Sometimes I think in the dressing room, wouldn't it be more important if one of us lost his job? Then we'd be in trouble. But it is a really interesting notion, this idea of how much an athlete achieves and what it gives him. There's the monetary rewards, there's the fame, there's the acclamation. But does it fill you spiritually? Does it make your life feel complete? And I thought there was something searching almost in what Scheffler said, that he was trying to figure out himself. This is what I've dedicated a huge track of my life to. Now he's saying I'd much rather be a good father and a good husband than a great golfer. But I think he's in a position to say it because he's at the top of the mountain. And I think the essence of sport is striving for greatness. And the actual achieving of it is often anticlimactic because you've pushed so long to get there, and it's the journey that matters most.
Yeah.
I wonder, would Scotty Scheffler take out a cigarette in the locker room like Johnny Pilkington used to after a game? Would he, after a round of golf, and drag back? And
well, I'd say his 20 majors that he's thinking of are beating Tiger and Jack Nicklaus.
That's an interesting quote. You're never a winner from LeBron James. You're never a winner until you win again.
Yeah.
I kind of feel that way about Rory McIlroy, and I didn't think I would after the Masters. You would looking at, well, that's it. It's complete now. He's set forever. Yet I was watching it yesterday afternoon. He was on the par 5 on the front. He was after birdie in 3 out of 4.
Yeah, the 7th, yeah.
On the 7th. Didn't make his birdie. He was off the green in 2 and he didn't make his birdie. And back to default, here we are again, Rory, and you're oohing and ahhing for him, having completed the Grand Slam and having completed, say, well, he'll never have to win again. Well, actually, he does have to win again. I didn't think I would feel that, but that's the way I sensed it yesterday. Not going to win here. Scotty Scheffler, Roy said it. He looks the most complete golfer.
I asked somebody about this yesterday, Colm and Roy. Who does he compare to? And somebody came back to me with a very good answer. Sampras.
Yeah,
with quite that kind of metronomic.
He's metronomic, and I've had a number of people saying to me that they can't warm to him. I can, because I think anybody who's pushing out the boundaries, who's doing things that others can't, and that delivers under the most intense pressure. We always talk about the pressure that Rory was under going to Augusta, and obviously it was accumulated baggage. But when there's an assumption, like they're betting without Scotty Scheffler today, he was 8-15 favourite yesterday with a 1-stroke lead in a 70-man field with 2 rounds of golf around the treacherous links remaining. There's a huge pressure that comes with that. And yet he goes out. We were talking before we came in, and you get the impression if Rory went out and shot 63 today, Scheffler would shoot 64 and win. He finds a way to get it done, and I think that's an enormously admirable quality in a sportsman. He's not the most demonstrative character ordinarily, but then we saw him reduced to tears when they got done in the Ryder Cup. Was it 9 and 8? He was a broken man. A guy who's saying he's not getting as much joy out of winning, and it doesn't have the longevity effect that he thought. He was still devastated when he lost, and that was the point I was making. He is a guy who strives for greatness, and like a lot of athletes who pursue perfection, he always just wants that little bit extra. And even when he wins all these majors, when he's the dominant player, there's still that sociopathic need for more and more and more.
But some guys like him are just better ploughing their own furrow as an individual sports person. He gets into a team environment and maybe he becomes a different person. Certainly McIlroy would lean towards the team environment, and he would, by admission, he would prefer it. And maybe that's the same with Scheffler. He wants to be part of a team. They're so used to ploughing their own furrow that they just become accustomed to almost the loneliness of that. And there may be an element of that with Scheffler, that he wants something else in the game. And it may be the Ryder Cup. If he showed that emotion 2 years ago, maybe that's his place. Maybe that's what he will strive for more. I think this time next year or the year after, we'll be talking about him as a Grand Slammer in the same.
He's not even 30, and he's already been arrested and released without charge. That will be in 20 years' time. What was that weird? That was one of the weirdest stories. Rick Broadbent just quote about McIlroy here in the Sunday Times on the 4th. The staff of the mansion lining the right edge of the fairway formed a guard of honour. His parents been staying there this week. On Thursday, he waved at his mum during his round. This time, he caused widespread pandemonium. Another near-perfect approach, another birdie with Scheffler, the last man out. McIlroy trimmed the lead to 4 in rapid time and whipped the crowd into a palpitating massive fandom. And that's the thing. Scheffler has been the preeminent player of the past 2 years, but he does not rouse reactions like this. He commands respect and admiration rather than the constant craving of a crowd enthralled to a flawed genius. He's great. McIlroy can do that, and he can do good, bad and ugly.
I think the flawed part is as important as the genius part in that analysis.
Is that because we all can identify more with it than Scheffler?
He's human. There is a robotic nature to Scheffler. There's no question about that. It's sort of AI against the last human alive. And Rory being that last human alive. And Rory is relatable on so many levels. He makes the most outrageous mistakes, follows them with moments of transcendent genius. He wears his heart on his sleeve on the golf course. He is generally, with the exception of the month before the Open, incredibly open in his dealings with the media. Answers every question honestly, too honestly, you find at times. He's introspective. He's aware of the world around him. He's a rounded individual. And there's something very likeable about that in an age when sportsmen are hidden away from us by agents, by advisors who make sure that very little of their personality is seen. We've seen all of Rory McIlroy. He's been out there in front of us for basically his entire adult life, even his pre-adult life. And I think we all feel we have a stake in him in the way that we have a stake in people like Sonia O'Sullivan, in the way that we had a stake in Katie Taylor. There's just a fairly strong relationship there.
I think that dates back to the second back nine on the last day in Augusta in 2010 when he made mistakes. We've all made countless numbers of times, and I just always distinctly remember him putting his head into his shoulder consistently after the bad drive, and that was the emotive aspect, and that's probably where the attachment grew. That he proved himself so human and so emotional that day. That evening around Augusta, that I think everyone has been with that emotion ever since, because that was really traumatic watching that at his age, to go through it and then to come out and do what he did in his next tournament in the US Open was just phenomenal. It showed both sides of him. It was Rory encapsulated in 2 tournaments, and that's the way he's been. That's the way he's been ever since. He's played well this week. He's done well. Slow enough start, but he's built up. But he's too far back here. And Scheffler's going to dominate, and I think even Rory recognises that once he's at the top of a leaderboard, he's going to be very, very hard to dislodge.
Shane McGrath, the Irish Daily Mail, golf needs to raise its game and speed the hell up just about the pace of play.
Well, actually, the pace of play, the great irony is that even Bryson DeChambeau is calling for quicker golf and for rounds to be put on clocks, which is a huge irony given how long Bryson will spend over a putt. Something he acknowledged himself, and he said in this, his quote here is, the first 2 rounds in Portrush, it was out of control what I saw, because it has been really, really slow. There's a lot of pinch points there. There's a par 4, I think it's the fifth that's drivable, so they have to wait. It's a tight track, Portrush. Obviously, you've got to wait in certain places on the back nine, and it has been slow. And some of them have been 5.5 hours out there, which for professionals, they're not hunting, looking for balls like the rest of us.
Just one of the things on this, it feels like Portmarnock's going to get this in the next few years. It's just amazing.
It is phenomenal. Even today, John, if we talk about sort of a hierarchy of great Irish sporting days, we've got the biggest golf tournament in the world, the final round, coinciding with our own celebration of the All-Ireland hurling. I would argue that today is the biggest day in Irish sporting history of events on our soil.
Yeah.
And the Portmarnock thing would take it to another level. I grew up in the 70s going to the Irish Open as a kid, cycling out on the bike across town, there at 6:30 in the morning, watching the first players on the putting green, staying there all day. And I fell in love with golf, Portmarnock and Royal Dublin at that time. And I recall, I think it was 82 when Bill Rogers won the Open. we were going on a family holiday and we were due to leave on the Sunday. I think I was 12 or 13. And I wouldn't get in the car because I wasn't missing a shot of the Open. And it had that effect. And you see the kids now following Rory. And I think if we got it down here, it would be a real boon for the game. There's been huge uptake in numbers of golf since COVID. And Portmarnock's a magnificent golf course. And it would be wonderful to see it here. It's just such a huge event. I mean, I think there were 2 million applications for tickets for Portrush globally. And whatever it is, 70,000 people there each day. It's an All-Ireland final each day, basically.
Access is an issue for Portmarnock, isn't it?
Yeah, they think they can find it. They think they have a way of building a traffic plan. I think there's going to be an Open in Portmarnock in the next 10 years.
Which is obviously the first time outside of Britain. We have the Lions obviously winning against Australia yesterday. Green Energy, the headline in the Irish Daily Mail. Farrell's Irish Stars step up on the big stage. Just a quotes from Rory Keane. Farrell banked on Tadhg and Tom Curry delivering on the big stage. He needed test match animals for this series, and both players fitted that bill perfectly. Farrell has always been a shrewd selector, and he was on the money again. This kind of on the pressure that has been on Farrell, I suppose, given the green tinted nature of. There's a lovely photo of Dan Sheehan, who scored a try, Tadhg and Jack Conan there in the dressing room after that win. Because it is important from an Irish perspective that the Lions do well. I think what's helping them is the fact that Australia are not very good.
That's the key factor. Sorry, Colm. We've spoke before about the importance of jeopardy in sport, and I've been very much into Lions tours in the past where we were facing particularly the All Blacks and New Zealand, or the All Blacks in South Africa, because rugby matters more in New Zealand and South Africa than it does in Australia, where it's maybe fourth in the sporting hierarchy at best. But this is just a pretty average Australian team. If they were playing Scotland would be favourites. And I thought the piece that captured how I felt about yesterday, I must be honest, was Owen Slott's piece in the Sunday Times, where the headline reads, "These wins are meant to be special against this Aussie side. It just felt sad." And Owen asks, was ever a stadium so quiet at the end? He talks about great Lions occasions he's been at, and the victories being valuable and special because they are just so preposterously hard to come by. And yet here in the Suncorp Stadium, the final whistle went, the players shook hands, the crowd started to shuffle out, and we all began to wonder, how are we going to get home? The Lions winning at a canter, it's unprecedented, and it turns out not half the fun. And I sort of felt that way. I struggled to get hugely engaged in it, which when you think that the two coaches are Ireland's current and previous coach, that more than half the Lions team were of the Irish international side, we should have been more engaged in it than ever. And yet back in the day when someone like Keith Wood or Brian O'Driscoll were one or two stars of the team, I found it, I was far more engaged.
Certainly, I was really engaged in the 2001 series with Australia, and obviously the Lions lost that, and the first test was essentially, although he had scored a hat-trick against France in the Six Nations or the Six Nations previous year, but Brian O'Driscoll's performance in the first test that day just blew everyone away. His breaks, it was just superb to watch it, and Rob Henderson together, and you're watching your Irish centre pairing crashing through Australia, who were world champions at the time. To see that was just amazing, to see two Irish guys go at it like that on the world stage. Keith Wood was playing that day too. It was just great to watch. And even in 2013 when Ireland played Australia, and they won the test series well, but Brian O'Driscoll was dropped from the last test. So that was just a huge talking point in Ireland. There's no real talking points about this Lions series. The Lions are expected to win well, and they will win well, and Irish players are dominating. Dan Sheehan proved yesterday morning again, or yesterday evening as it was over there, he is the best number 2 in the world. He is Ireland have a few contenders that you would say for world class in their positions, and Tadhg would be one of those, even though he played in a different position. But Dan Sheehan is out and out. He's a magnificent number 2. He throws it well, he carries well, he tackles well, he does it all well.
He's a phenomenal athlete.
He really is. But it's just Australia, and as Roy pointed out, AFL is the biggest sport over there.
Rugby
Cricket,
league as well.
Rugby league has it ahead of that. So it's, and like obviously rugby is probably behind in terms of participation, Gaelic games and soccer as well in this country, for elevation and where it sits in people's minds. It's probably a bit higher. But generally, union in Australia appears to be struggling. Maybe they're getting it back a little bit. I would have thought Joe Schmidt, his arrival as coach, would have kicked things on a little bit more, and maybe it will. But as Roy points out, Scotland, England and Ireland in their own right would be all expected to beat Australia down there and up here. So it really doesn't feel like a fair fight. And obviously the Lions brand will suffer. People will give out about the Lions and the whole concept. What's the point in 4 strong teams playing one? But it's a historical thing. It's a tradition. If you don't like it,
It's very popular.
it's very popular, and it's a
Filling the
tourist thing. And people from Scotland like to mix it on the terraces and in the stands, on the stands, with people from England, supporters from England, and it's just a journey for them. And for players to represent something different, it's different form, no more than the Ryder Cup, no more than the international rules. People will scoff at it and say, what's the point of all this? But it's a diversion, and it's something different in terms of sporting competition, and you can't knock it completely. Yes, the Australian element, there is that, but maybe the Four Nations on these islands won't always be as strong, where they will be as dominant over an Australian team, and they certainly won't be as strong and dominant when they go back out to New Zealand next time around. So it will survive, and it is a different, quirky concept, and we can give out about it all we like, but if that's the way you feel, just don't watch it or don't engage in it.
It's also a vital cash cow to a sport that is having existential financial difficulties. Wales talking about reducing to 2 regions.
No Wales player in the squad for since 1899.
It's incredible how far Wales have fallen. I mean, they lost to Japan a couple of weeks ago. Was that their 17th defeat in a row or something of that ilk? But they're cutting back in the regions in Wales. In Australia, the game was essentially bankrupt, and the Lions has been a bailout for them. I think it's really interesting that the French are now looking to get in on the act, and a Lions tour of France is being mooted, and Benassi, the French president, is out there discussing that at the moment, and that might be another dimension. I mean, playing the likes of Toulouse and Bordeaux and La Rochelle in the midweeks, and then test matches. Obviously, geographically, it wouldn't have the same distance to travel,
but from a jeopardy point of view, because that's interesting, because France, to me, are getting just better and better and better. And if you look at other countries, like remember Hungary in football, West Indies in cricket, United States in men's tennis, things wane. Yeah. Australia might be just waning.
I think there'd be a real edge between the Lions and France. I think the French would go down into the dirt to beat the Lions and really put their noses in it. Yeah. So I think it'd be a great concept. Okay, it's a trip across to France. So what? It'd be great. France in the summer. It'd be beautiful. It'd be pretty warm out there, but it'd be something to follow. And you're going into Toulouse and all the whoever else. You play a couple of the club teams there, maybe French barbarians or something like that. You'd be really up against it. So I think that's definitely an avenue worth exploring, because I think there'd be real edge there.
Absolutely. A nice article by Rory O'Connor on Miles Harrison, the commentator, on his lifelong love affair with the Lions, his O'Driscoll doubts and his journey back from cancer, to call the series This Was Unfinished Business. Worth reading. Miles Harrison with Rory O'Connor. Just folks, Evan Ferguson going to Roma. Paul Rowan writing in the Sunday Times, he misses the Brighton camp to seal Roma deal, so he's going to go on loan, it seems, to Roma, Evan Ferguson, with an option for the Italian club to buy the 20-year-old from Brighton. So, obviously he was a huge player to come on the scene. Back of the Mirror today, Evan is off to Italy with a blockbuster 40 million deal in the offing. There's a buy option included, and hopefully he just gets first-team football now.
Yeah, I think the Evan Ferguson one speaks of our hunger to anoint someone as the next big thing, because we have waited so long in Irish football after having that period that started with Euro 88 and possibly up to Japan, Korea in 2002 was the golden age of Irish football, and we had players playing for the top clubs. We were hugely competitive on the biggest international stages. We had historic results, and it's falling so badly away in tandem with the FAI being an unholy mess. And there's a hunger for a recapturing of those days, and we place huge onus on the shoulders of very young players to develop into something great. And Evan Ferguson obviously made immediate and initial spectacular progress at Brighton. He had people like Alan Shearer talking in waxing lyrical about him. But we're also seeing the reality where he slipped down the pecking order at Brighton. There were injuries last year. The vast wealth of the Premier League, Brighton brought in new players.
West Ham didn't work out.
West Ham didn't work out at all. And now it's funny when we've seen how Scott McTominay, amongst others, revived his career in Italy, surplus to requirements at Manchester United, and essentially the player of the year as Napoli swept to glory. The game is played at a much slower pace in Italy. It's as technically skillful, but you see a lot of older players at the end of their career. We're seeing Kevin De Bruyne now going there. It's a real opportunity, I think, for Ferguson.
Yeah. Just to finish as well, Colm, you were watching the Usyk fight last night. Alexander Usyk now, once again, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world in boxing.
He put down Daniel Dubois in the 5th round twice. He really is. He stands out there alone now in terms of heavyweights, and he's come up. He's come up to fight. And the best of British can't get near him now. So that's Tyson Fury twice and Dubois twice. There's talk of a fight maybe with Dylan White or with Anthony Joshua. I think Joseph Parker from New Zealand. Whoever it is, he's going to dominate. He's 38 now, but he still looks as if he's got another year or two, couple of years left in him, and fighting for Ukraine, putting Ukraine on the map.
He's a huge beacon for Ukraine.
He is, and he's not the biggest, but he's a really skillful
boxer. Trump come and live in Ukraine for a week.
Yeah,
that was the phrase.
Yeah. So he's really stood out there, put himself out on a pedestal now as the best heavyweight of the modern era. He's taken. He's gone way by Fury. I don't know, will Fury come back out, and he might be looking for a third fight, but I think Usyk has his measure and really dispatched Dubois. He was lethal last night.
I've really enjoyed the chat, Colm Keys and Roy Curtis. I'd say Dublin is going to be hopping tonight, and maybe the south of the country as well.
Yes, well, I intend to be in a watering hole
very shortly.
Very shortly.
Thank you very much for this.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Roy.
Thanks. We're back on your radio at 1 o'clock, folks. Off the ball. What's a special day for sport on this island, as Roy said. We got Tommy Welsh at Croke Park. We got Colin Ryan in studio to follow every moment of Cork against Tipperary in the 2025 All-Ireland Senior Hurling Final. RGA correspondent Tommy Rooney will be getting all the reaction as well. We'll also bring you the latest from Nathan Murphy at Royal Portrush on the final day of golf's Open Championship. You know what to do. Turn on your radio at 1 o'clock and we'll chat then.
The Sunday Paper Review
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care. Proud sponsors of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care, because care changes everything.
Good morning, I'm Tara Duggan. A post-mortem will be carried out today on the body of a man found dead in